Mettler, and it looks like we have a fair number. We'll probably wait just another minute or two for some late stragglers to arrive. I think at this point people should be seeing the agenda for the next hour or whatever it takes on my screen, and we'll wait for a little bit and then we'll get the kickoff.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stacy Holmes. I'm a forester with BIA Central Office. I just finished my detail yesterday as the branch chief for the Branch of Forest Resources Planning. So I've been heavily involved with this year's funding and position analysis. So a little bit of background, the fiscal year 2019 funding and position analysis is the 6th survey of the Indian Forestry Program funding and staffing levels since 1991, at least that BOFARP, and that's the acronym for the Branch of Forest Resources Planning, has assisted with. We were involved with data collection in 1991, 1996, 2001, 2006, and 2011. The data that we collect is not designed to identify accomplishments or deficiencies. It is used to identify the needs of the forestry program and to look at staffing and funding trends over time. This year, we're collecting fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020 data at the request of ITC and the IFMAT team. And they're going to cover in a little bit why they requested that and why it is important. Per the August 21st, 2020 memo from the BIA director, the fiscal year 2019 data is due October 31st. And then there's going to be a request for fiscal year 2020 data that will, in a memo that will be sent out to the regional directors in November. And the data for the fiscal year 2020 will be due in January of 2021. In the past, we have used Excel spreadsheets that were distributed out to the regions, agencies, and tribes for data collection. And some of you might be familiar with that. For this round of data collection, BOFARP developed a computer application called FPA Analysis. And each regional office, agency, and tribe is being asked to enter their data into a Microsoft Access database using this application. The memo that was sent out from the BIA director to each region asked each region to designate a regional coordinator to distribute the databases and instructions to the agencies and tribes. And BOFARP set up a Microsoft Teams site to deploy the databases to each of the regions and to share information with the regional coordinators. BOFARP also provided the regional coordinators with copies of the funding and position analysis reports from 2011. So that's just a little bit of background on the funding and position analysis. And now I'm going to turn it over to the IFMAT team to discuss the importance of the FPA data collection.
Kurt, were you going to pull up the PowerPoint for me?
Yeah, I can do that. I wasn't sure if that was going to work, but I believe I've got it here handy.
While Kurt's doing that, my name is Vinny Correo. I'm the program coordinator for the IFMAT 4 team. The team is made up of John Gordon and John Sessions, who have been on the IFMAT assessments for the last 3 and will be participating with 4. And we have Sarah Hoagland and Adrian Layton also as co-chairs who are going to be available and conducting this IFMAT 4 test.
So, Vinny, it sounds like we're getting some feedback off of your, at least for me, I'm getting feedback off of your microphone.
If you can hit your mic there and mute it, it'll help. Great. Could you pull that up just a little bit more for me, Kurt, so I can see the whole slide?
How's that?
Good, good. So the Indian Forest Management Assessment Team, we just wanted to share a little bit. I did send this PowerPoint out to the email list that the Bureau provided so that everyone should have a copy of this, but I'd just like to go through the importance of the data to the IFMAT team and to the assessment and to the results that we are able to come out with in the report for the tribes. So the funding and position analysis is used extensively. So we can go to the next slide here. So we just want to do, we're going to do a quick overview. Stacy did a rather nice job on a little bit of the background and the history of the FP&A. We're going to talk a little bit about the task and the deliverables we're looking for. And it is a national perspective, how it contributes to the report. And a lot of it is used for funding sources for the tribes, which has been very important. And also the 2019 and 20, because of COVID, is expected to have some significant impacts in 2020. We want to look at 2019 and also 20. So next slide, Kurt. And Stacy touched on this, but the funding and position analysis originated for a report to the Secretary of Interior back in 1982, provided by a task force dealing with the administrative fees on Indian timber management. And at that time, it used data from 1981. There has been 6 of FMPA reports completed during 1984 through 1996. And then a 1996 BIA forestry assessment set up some reporting requirements. And the study recommended to streamline the BIA requirements and that the FMPA report would be completed every 10 years and that the Indian Forest Management Assessment Team would then use that data. Next slide. Okay, Kurt, next slide. I'm not going to go through every one of these 8 points, but these are the original 8 points of the National Indian Forest Resource Management Act. I think everyone hopefully has this, but if you don't, let us know, we'll get it out. But I'll just summarize the 8 points that have been addressed the last 30 years is an in-depth analysis on the management practices dealing with funding levels, and we compare it to federal and private lands. We also did a survey that looks at the condition of Indian forest lands, including health, an evaluation of staffing, both with the Bureau and with the tribes, an evaluation of procedures employed in timber sales. We also look at an analysis of the potential for reducing and eliminating administrative procedures and look at all the different recent laws. We're also going to look at the new Indian Trust Asset Reform Act, ITARA. A comprehensive review of the adequacy of Indian forest management plans. We also will look at the evaluation of feasibility and desirability of establishing minimum standards for which we can evaluate the adequacy of the forestry programs with the Bureau of Indian Affairs fulfilling their trust responsibility. And the last one that's been in all 4 IFMATs, a recommendation of any reforms and increased funding levels necessary to bring Indian forest land management programs to a state-of-the-art condition. And then Kurt will move to the next slide. The Intertribal Timber Council additionally added 3 more questions, and they include the first one, the evaluation of the tribal risk and adaptation related to climate change, an assessment of how Indian forests fit into the general scheme of landscape ecology and restoration, And the 11th one, so this brings us to 11 tasks: an assessment of institutional capability, staff, equipment, facility, and organizational components necessary to support landscape scale management. So we're also looking at the opportunities that tribes have to move in the future. So our task is to provide a national perspective. We will draw conclusions at the national level, although we may display and interpret data at a regional level where there are major differences between the regions. For some tasks, a sample of a tribe's will be appropriate and given the time and resources, but for other these tasks, there may be a near full accounting to produce a more reliable national result. And all the data that is aggregated, all the sources and all that information is kept confidential. It is not identified by region or by tribe. It's a national perspective. Next slide, Kurt. So why we rely on FMPA as a critical data source for several of the tasks. We use this information for almost all the assessment, but these 4 tasks, it's imperative that this data come in so that we can do an in-depth analysis on the management practices and the level of funding for the Pacific Indian lands. And then we can compare that to the federal and other private lands. We also use that data to evaluate the staffing patterns of the forestry organizations with the Bureau and the tribes. And then if we're going to recommend any reforms and increase funding levels necessary to bring those land managements to the state of the art. And then on task K, the assessment of institutional capacity, which deals with staff, equipment, facilities, and organizational components. So if without the FPA data, we are definitely a loss of very vital information to answer these tasks. Next one, Kurt. So understanding all funding sources are important. Going back to the IFMAT task H, we're to make recommendations on any reforms and increase what we consider recurring funding levels necessary to bring the forest land management programs to the state of the art. We found in IFMAT 3 that often tribal staff spends significant time and effort applying for and administering non-recurring funds. Tribal and other sources such as NRCS, federal and non-federal grants can be significant, but often on non-recurring funding sources. So we want to look at those, and when providing the data on non-BIA contributions to your forestry program helps IFMAT understand total forestry funding inputs. So in order to meet what considered state-of-the-art forestry, we need to understand the level of funding and the consistency of the funding to meet those responsibilities. Next slide, Kurt. We can go to the next slide, Kurt. Did I lose you, Kurt? Did it freeze? No. All right, Kurt, you still there? I lost him. Did you freeze up, Kurt? I think we lost. Did we lose Kurt? Laura, can you advance?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm back. I was trying to get rid of all the people that are messaging me, and I crashed out of the wrong one. Hopefully it's back up.
Yeah, just you can move to the next slide, slide 9.
Okay. Are you on? You're seeing slide 9?
No, I'm on 8. I see 8. I don't see 9. I'm stuck on 8.
See, it's my screen maybe not sharing again, Laura. Do you need to? I think, Laura, you might have to share my screen again.
Hey, gentlemen, I'm sorry, this might be operator error, but on my side, all I can see is the list of participants. I'm not seeing slide 8 or 9. Warfeld here.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm in this. Okay, here it comes. Got it.
Hopefully we're back. Sorry about that, folks.
I got it. Everybody got it? All right. So we talked a little bit about why 2019 and 2020, the FMPA is usually used every 10 years. We use it as the decadal mark as the base year. So 2020 not being a typical year due to COVID, that we want to look at 2019 as our base year, but we will also look at 2020 so that we can mark the differences. All right, we can go to the next slide. So in conclusion, the IFMAT reports have supported major forestry funding requests to Congress over the last 30 years and provides an accurate picture of Indian forestry and forest management to promote better policy making, and also supports tribal vision for management. And although tribes are exercising many increased self-determination, just to remind that all BIA funding pretty much comes from the same source, and the more reoccurring funding we can get will benefit all the tribes. So we just, again, this PowerPoint should be available to everyone, and if somebody needs it, please feel free to forward it or get a hold of me or the IFMAT team, and we'll send it to you. So I really do thank you for your help and participation in this report. Thanks, Kurt.
You bet. And just to reiterate what the two speakers have said, it is an important process to get through on this. So, take your time getting through it. Make sure you get accurate information in. The better information that's better will be when it comes out the other end. And again, there's some time frames in there that we talked about. I think at least for the Northwest, I'm the coordinator for the Northwest region, but I'm also kind of helping out on the national level of kind of coordinating and pulling this information together. That we're due like October 23rd, so we have time to look at the data, make sure it's accurate information, get back with the tribes as necessary, and then move it on to Central Office BOFARC for them to pull all of the information together and then start working on the analysis report itself. So I guess at this point, I'll just open it up to any questions for the first two speakers, if anybody has anything they want to ask about. All right, well, that sounds wonderful. Nobody has any questions, comments, everybody's good. So the next, you're gonna get listen to me for a while, as long as you can handle it, and then you can always beg out as you decide you've heard enough from me. We've had a couple of these already in the Northwest and others, and this is gonna be fairly similar to that information that was presented, except for this first item on the agenda, or the third item on the agenda. The first one for me is, I'm assuming at this point, because it's been out for 2, 3, 4 weeks now, everybody has downloaded the application, and the database has been, you've been able to get the database either from your regional forester or your regional FPA point of contact. Now, and just a little bit about that end of it, is every region has a point of contact to deal with the funding and position analysis collection process. And if there wasn't a regional FPA appointed, by default the regional forester was, and I think Stacy has heard from at least half of the regional foresters, or half of the regions, that they're moving on with this this process. They've got information out to the tribes and agencies and such. Now, at least for those from the Northwest that might be on the call, if you're still having issues getting the application downloaded or connected to the database, email me specifically, just email to me and say, hey, I need some help getting this to work. I think through the Northwest, I think everybody, with the possible exception of Lummi, I hadn't heard from Lummi back yet. They were the only one I think that was hanging out, that were having issues getting the application downloaded and connected to the database. For those from other regions, you will need to talk to your regional coordinator, whoever that might be. I don't have that list, or you can get hold of Stacy and she can let you know who your regional coordinator is, or talk to your regional forester to say, hey, I was on that webinar and they said you have all the answers for this, help me out. And hopefully then they will be able to help you out. So I'm going to start with this. I've already downloaded the application here and everything, but my first process, remove the agenda from the screen and just kind of show how to get into the application, how to connect to the database, and then we're going to work through the various screens in the database. So you will have something like this that shows up on your screen once you download the database or download the application. And then clicking on that will open the application up. And you should see something that says version 1.04. If you have something 1.00, that's the database from this past winter, from January, February. That application is not the one to use. You need the one that's actually 1.04. And this is what it looks like. The application looks like. What you're going to do is go to choose a database, and you should have downloaded this. What you want to do is have this on your C drive, BOFART, FPA analysis. So I have mine in here on the Northwest. Then you'll select the one MDB, which is usually the biggest file you got out there. You're going to select that. Ours in the Northwest says Northwest. For each region, it will have a different name on it. You'll open that, and then down in the very right-hand corner that you can maybe barely see down here, but let me do it this way. Lower right-hand corner, it will show you what the database is that you're connected to. If you don't see that database there, that means you're not into the database and you need to try and figure out how to get connected to that. But that connects to the database. The next thing you're going to want to do is then, and I guess the other thing I want to say is, at any point in time, anybody has any questions, feel free to interrupt and say, hey, can you go over that, or I need some more clarification on that. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep plowing through. If you got a question, I may or may not see a hand raised. Somebody else might, Stacy or Laura or somebody might see a hand raised in the chat thing, but other than that, just feel free to interrupt and ask the question. So we've done this choose FPA database. We're going to go into select organization after that. This screen will pop up. For each region, you're going to have your region listed in here. So you will have to click on that. It's highlighted blue, but it actually, you have to click on it to select it. And then you're going to have a list of all the agencies within the region that shows up. And I'm just going to pick one here to pull up Olympic Peninsula. Then you're going to have, under that, you're going to have a number of tribes that are appropriate to that agency. And then you can select any tribe that you want out of that list. And I don't think any of these have any data. I'm going to switch this to one that I know has some data. I'm going to go to Puget Sound. And let me take a look at Lummi, because I'm not sure if, anyways, we'll take a look. They have some information. Then you're going to select the reporting period of 2019. And like was mentioned, this will be coming out again for 2020 data. At that point in time, you're going to select the 2020. You'll notice down here in the lower left, right now, it says select reporting organization. Once I click on this and hit the OK, it's going to pop up with who the person is, contact information. This is the first thing to do. You will have to come back to this after you've completed this exercise, this reporting, and fill in this information down here, whether you complete it as a team or a single person, the date you're submitting it, and how long it took you to do this. And this is just kind of some general information for folks to know. If you complete it as a team, add up all the hours that it took for, each individual and total them up together. Contact name, phone, and email is important so that if the regional coordinator or if BOFARP has a question on some of the data, they know who to call to say, hey, I see this number is in here. Is that really right or what? So if there's questions, they're going to contact this person. Don't just put down your regional forester or something like that. Put down the person who's completing this information. And for me, I'm not going to do this for Lummi at this point in time. Tom gets to do that on his own. But what it does, as soon as I did that, it puts down the tribe down here in the lower left corner. You see what agency you are and tribe you're now connected with. So I'm looking at Lummi 2019. And again, the database is on the lower right. What the tribe you're connected to, what you're working on, is in the lower left. So make sure those are appropriate for your situation. And if you need to get back to that previous screen, this contact, that's in this drop-down menu right here, pops it right back up so you can go back in and complete this information as well and ensure that this information is correct up here. So this upper left circle is kind of how you get to everything. And then the other, this help one, and I'll just show you this quick so you know, version 104. If you have the older version of this, you need to re-download this application and get the newest version. One thing, go ahead, was there a question?
Yeah, hey Kurt, this is George. I noticed Select's agency was still listed there. I believe it was. And of course, that agency was closed several years ago. So are you under that agency name?
Yes, so that hasn't gone, the Siletz agency isn't there, but it resides there for some of the tribes as kind of the grouping of these 5 tribes. So that's where you would find the tribal one. It's there, and we kind of deal with it still, call it the Siletz agency, but it's really the regional office that deals with them on direct service, but they're listed under the Siletz agency.
Yeah, the agency itself doesn't exist anymore.
Correct, yeah. And this is the information that populates this, and Stacy might want to, I don't know if you want to chime in on the update to this at all that was supposed to occur over the summer?
Yeah, sure. So before Dawn Patterson started her detail as the acting chief forester, she had sent out a data call to all the tribes with the tribal listing that was in InfoDat and funding and position analysis. And we had asked the regions to look through that and to let us know what organizations didn't need to show up in funding and position analysis. We only heard back from 3 or 4 regions on that. So when you're going through the funding and position analysis, I just encourage you to choose the appropriate organization out of the list for your data entry, because you might see a couple of different listings that could look like your tribe.
And if you need to, I guess that was sent out to the regional foresters to update. If you did, great. Yeah, ours used to be completely different. Let me give you the example. For Tahola, there used to be, I think, 3 or 4 different listings for Quinault. So we consolidated it down into one listing so that there wasn't a misunderstanding between the agency, the fee hands, and that. There was like 3 or 4 different ones on there, but it's now just one. Now, if you have a tribe that you want that needs data collected that's not there, get with Stacy and they can get that added in. But if you have some extras on there that can be removed, get with Stacy on that as well. Afterwards, just do a screenshot maybe and say, hey, remove these two because this is the one where the data is going to go. And that will help them clean up the whole database, the information that's out there. So I'm going to go back here to Puget Sound, to Lummi, 2019. Oh, actually, I'm still in there. You can see down here, I'm still in there. So the other thing I want to point out is that when the database and the information came out over the winter, and so the application is new and the database is new. If you have a database, for example, I saved mine in this old one. So if you have a database that's back, well, updated because I did some work on it. But if your database has a date of back in January or February, maybe even December of 2019, don't use that. It'll goof things up and you'll have, it won't work. You need to have the current database that should have roughly an August 25th or later. Okay. So that takes care of, at that point in time, when you have that, you're connected, you should be able to start entering information in. Now I got to look over at my other screen to make sure I'm not forgetting something here. So on to item 4D for those following along on the agenda, the statistics team screen, which is this. I'm going to do some overview of stuff. If you see an item that I don't cover in here, feel free to say, hey, what about this? What about that? So when you initially get your database for your tribe, for Lummi, for example, this is 9,875 tribal trust acres. The instructions over here show that that came from the Catalog of Forest Acres. Now, the Catalog of Forest Acres doesn't differentiate between tribal, allotted, public domain, or anything else. So this is the grand total of the acres that are out there associated with Lummi, but that is probably an error because there are allotments there. So some of those acres need to be reallocated down to here. So the forest manager, whoever's filling this out, just be aware that it pre-populates there, but that doesn't mean you better leave it there. You need to fix it and allocate it across these different categories. The public domain actually got added in as well on this now. There's some additional information in here that's being split out, I guess what you might say. If you have a reservation that oversees public domain, they may not be within the reservation boundary, but you deal with public domain allotments, add those in here. A lot of the tribes, at least in the Northwest, would have a separate split for public domain, but the comments kept coming in as, well, we don't get any extra funding for dealing with public domain. We still manage them. We do everything. There's no additional people or anything else. So we're pulling those acres in as part of the management for that tribe, rather than having it split out with acres and having to split some sort of dollars and people out that maybe a very minor portion of their job is dealing with the public domain tracts. The reservation, you'll notice over in here that the reservation and forest are not defined over in the right-hand instruction column. And reservation, I think we decided that one was the total trust acres within the reservation. So that could include farmland, cropland, rangeland, all the things, all the other things. That will be your total trust acres. The forest you can put it in, but it's actually going to end up being calculated. That'll be the total of the tribal trust, allotted trust, and public domain, because these are all forested acres over here. One of the things I can't emphasize enough is if you get to one of these and you're not sure, hey, it says tribal trust, does that mean forest land? Does that mean all tribal land? What does that mean? Read the instructions. So this is the catalog. It comes from catalog of forest acres. This is the forest acres. Doesn't total number of tribal trust. That probably should say tribal forest trust acres, but it's from the forest. It's the total forest acres. Is this one here. So it's your total of those tribal, allotted, and public domain. Again, this one is pre-populated, but it may or may not be correct. Be careful looking at that. That's you got to update that as well, because that came from the commercial or from the catalog of forest acres as well. Most all of these populated out of catalog forest acres, and it doesn't split things out necessarily how this FPA does. The volumes, when you get down here, one thing to keep in mind, this is in board feet, not 1,000 board feet or million board feet. It is in board feet. So if you put some numbers in there that are actually in MBF, in 1,000 board feet, it's going to skew the results, and it's not going to be accurate. So that's one of the things that I look at when things get submitted. That you know, if this was 1,460, I'd say, is it? I don't think that's right. You're missing some zeros in there, and I've had one that's come in already that was that way, and I had to have them fix that to add the zeros on there. So keep in mind that one is in board feet. And again, split out with the different categories there. Pre-populated with what's going on. The one thing, this free use one, I'll point that again. I'm emphasizing some of these, but if you have questions on some of it, feel free to interrupt. So on free use, the instructions say free use by permit and free use without a permit. So if you have, if your tribe allows harvest of firewood, for example, without a permit, all they need is their tribal ID card. You're going to have to somehow wing some sort of a number in there for volume that might be associated with that. So it's the volume, it's the actual permits that get issued, signed and issued, and the stuff without permits. It's the combination of the two. And if you have, following into that, if you need to convert some of the stuff, if all you are doing is by weight, and you need to convert it into board feet, or if you harvest in cords and you need to convert it to board feet, make sure you include your conversion factors down in this section. You can put them in even if you don't use them to convert, but just for informational purposes, just for us to see what the conversion factors are. Values in dollars, fairly self-explanatory. Down to this other miles. One of the questions that I had recently was, how do I come up with the road construction miles if it's done by a contractor? You know, that we advertise the sale and we say you got to build 3 miles of road. We don't know what their costs are. What I would suggest and what I told them is use whatever you put in the appraisal. You know, if you appraised it out at $10,000 a mile and you put 3 miles in, well, you put 3 miles and you put $30,000 in there. So if you don't know for sure what it is, use what your appraised amount was for when you did the appraisal on the timber sale. Activities, these are all fairly self-explanatory. Hazard reduction acres, HFR acres, that's a new category. So if you've done this, if you did this over the winter, and your data was fine, I'm not going to mess with this again. There are several things, and I know some tribes, some regions were like, well, we're completely done. We're just using the data that we submitted this past winter. There are a couple of questions that got added since the winter one that we did. This is one of them, HFR acres right there. Under sales supervised, I just wanted to point out, and it's not clear in the directions, it says number of timber sale contracts that were active during the reporting period. I would say put contracts and permits. The instructions should say contracts and permits. So how many did you guys oversee during the course of the year? How many were active? And I think the rest of these are fairly self-explanatory. I think we changed, I thought we updated this one, Stacy, on the number of stands. I thought that was going to change to something else. It's the direction. The number
Yeah, I'll have to look into that, Kurt.
Okay. I think the number of stands, we started looking at this and it didn't seem to make a lot of sense because stands could be 3 acres or they could be 100 acres. So it didn't really make sense to say, hey, we did 4 stands when some tribes that might be, 4,000 acres. Some it might be, 400 acres. So we were trying to get this one changed to acres. I guess at this point in time, stick with what the directions say, I guess, right, Stacy? A number of stands.
Yeah, to be consistent, since it's been out there, we should probably stick to what the directions say.
Okay. And then this one got added in, I think, like a 1 or 2 times ago, about the number of facilities and the distance to facilities. Any questions on the statistics page before I move along?
Hey, Kurt, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, hey, this is Glenn Maxim. So that catalog of forest acres that you keep referring to in the statistics, where do you find that at? Is that something that the BIA has?
You want to handle that one, Stacy?
Sure, yeah, this is Stacy. Yeah, so the catalog of forest acres is maintained by the BIA and it's updated annually with the year-end data reporting. Most recently, we're using an application called FIRST to report that information. And this year, end of fiscal year, we're using an application called InfoDat, which is the Indian Forestry Database. But it's the responsibility of the regions and the regional foresters to maintain that and make sure we have good numbers.
I was going to open it, but it may take longer than I want to wait on it. But it's kind of a branch tree it kind of breaks down all the acres that you have out there that are accessible, forested, commercial forest, non-commercial, and everything else. Let me see if this is going to get me in there right away. I'm not. It's a report that the regional sends something out on the updating the catalog of forest acres. I don't think Ken's on the line, but he's the one who usually sends that out for the Northwest. So that'll be something to be maintained. I think we should be able to provide that information of what was in there for your tribe, what's been submitted in the past. And again, whatever was submitted is pretty populated in here.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Anybody else? All right, moving along to allocations. Look back over here at my notes. One thing to keep in mind on allocations, these are, click into here to get the instructions to show, hopefully, there. So over here in the instructions, and again, if you have any questions, the best thing is most of us, it's like, I don't want to read the instructions, but they actually are pretty helpful and they'll tell you things. But what it says is that identifies funding source that was available to the program, not what was spent, not what you necessarily spent, but what was available to you. And I would, during the year, I wouldn't use carryover from previous years, even though that might be available to you, but just use what was made available to you for this collection process during fiscal year 2019. It's not what you spent, but what was available. So if you got an allocation from the BIA of $150,000 and you only spent $140,000, you're going to put the $150,000 in there. What was available to the program? Most tribes are not going to have anything in the central operations and regional operations. If you do, you'll probably get a call to say, what the heck, where'd you get that? You're going to have TPA funds. You may have some other, and then you're going to be down into this non-recurring side for your forestry program. A couple of things that got added on this compared to what we did over the fire. And fire suppression got added in. So these are different categories that had not been there, and I think BAR had been as well. There's like 3 of these that are new from what we did this last January, February. If you have something that your old data and you need to update it, add the information in there. We're trying to get a little more inclusive of all the fire dollars that came to the reservation for use as well. Then you have this section on other funding sources. I think these were added in as well. This is only for work on trust lands. If you got Forest Service funds to work off reservations on a land LSR landscape project, or LRS landscape restoration project, don't include the dollars on here if it was for non-trust off reservation stuff. Only for the funding that was utilized for trust work on trust land, as per the instructions. See if I'm lying to y'all. On trust lands. So that's you may get a bunch of money for doing stuff off res on non-trust. Don't include that in there. One of the things I didn't mention, but for each of these tabs up here, there's the remarks and justifications down here. If you want to show that you got Forest Service funds for, you know, a project offer on non-trust lands, feel free to put it in the comments and the information down here. You just put in the item number, you know, Forest Service funding, $100,000 for review of Forest Service stuff, if you choose to put that in. I will mention that it's quite useful to put items in down here so that you or somebody else in 5 years or this winter can remember why and how they put anything up in these sections up above. It's really helpful to, oh, hey, I got FMDs from this, or I got TPA was the total dollars that was available, even though, you know, whatever the case is. Fire suppression was for these 3 fires, we got $1 million, whatever it is. Any other questions on the allocations tab, or any questions on that?
Hey, Kurt, this is George again. For the self-governance tribes that their funding comes through the annual funding agreement, quite a bit of that money is under consolidated tribal government funding, and it's not specifically identified to a program. And then internally, the tribe can allocate that money as it chooses to the various programs. So I'm a little curious as to what should be shown if it's actually the annual funding agreement flow of money that comes down, which has a whole bunch of information on it. It can actually come down in just one pot of money, and then the tribe makes decisions on the distribution. And maybe this can't be answered right now, but I just wanted to raise that as to how we would deal with that.
I guess my perspective is you would put down what the tribe has made available for the program during the year. So it doesn't matter, you know, if normally, you know, it's supposed to be $300,000 and it comes down in the OSG consolidated, $300,000 for forestry, and the tribe says, well, we're only giving you $200,000 because the other $100,000 we have different priorities for. You would put down the $200,000. What was available to the program by the BIA or by the tribe, I guess, in this situation. You don't have access to that other 100,000. Just put down what you had available for the program.
Yeah, we
You
can
could
talk more
footnote
about
it down. You could certainly footnote it at the bottom that, hey, the tribe took $100,000 and reprioritized it if you want. Down here at the bottom, remark location.
There actually, in the funding that comes down, there may not be any identifier for forestry. It would be all under consolidated tribal government. So I guess what you're saying is then the determination that the tribe made in the budget process internally, you want that number reflected, broken out from the consolidated tribal government number.
Certainly, yeah. Don't overinflate it by putting the the $3 million for consolidated tribal government. Put down whatever was allocated out for the forestry program to use.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on the allocations tab? And I think all of these tribal contribution ones, I know there's tribes that some of that is probably a little bit confidential. You'll notice over here under tribal contributions, they are all optional. However, I know the folks with IFMAT would probably be interested in knowing how much, utilizing how much offset is coming from tribal contributions to make the programs whole or functional, I guess. So even though it does say optional, and I don't know if Vinny or one of you, the IFMAT folks, want to speak to that at all, but it gives a better idea of what the program's costing, even though it's coming from tribal contributions, but it gives a better idea of what it takes to run the program.
Yeah, Kurt, this is Vinny. I know that that's a sensitive series of numbers, but I would just share with everyone that the IFMAT team will compare funding levels to both private and other agencies to determine if the funding levels are appropriate, and if the tribes are having to fund their own program, it would be important, but we certainly understand confidential. And then all the information we collect is confidential. We don't separate it out by individual tribe or individual projects or programs. So it would only be between the IFMAT team and the tribe, not between shared with anybody else.
Yeah, and this is Adrian. If I could just add to that, one of the things that we found in IFMAT 3, just through site visits and talking to folks, was that tribal contributions were going up as a percentage of forestry, and that we're spending a lot of time and effort going after grants and other funding sources. And so, this is something that we would really like to track on that national scale. So as Vinny said, everything will be aggregated and everything will be kept confidential, but this has been a really important trend we want to understand better.
All right, with that, we'll be moving on to the staffing tab up top here. The first thing I want to point out is you have two tabs, one for federal staff and one for tribal staff, and sometimes this tab doesn't work right, but they're identical. Click on the one that's appropriate to your situation. Some agencies, some tribes may have a combined tribal and federal. You may have to fill out both tabs. If you're one or the other, fill out the appropriate one. These are all put in as man years. Maybe that ought to be person years to be politically correct these days, but it's man years what you put down. You have the different functions down here that you'll put in, and I don't know why it does this sometimes, Stacy, but every once in a while it freezes up and it froze up on me, so I can't scroll down.
Okay, I'm taking note of that, Kurt. Thank you.
So anyway, yeah, and I'm not sure what causes that, but every once in a while it does that. So let me See if I can click back into it. Yeah, it's still not. But there's a couple of more categories down in here. But you have a bunch of different categories and subcategories for whatever staff you have. You'll split them out into the professional series, technical series, your support staff, and then temporary seasonals. We did add, I think a time or two ago, the contractors. If you have contractors that you hire on to do inventory or pre-sale planning or whatever it is, you're going to put some information in that one, in that column as well. So as best you can, and if you've got a, if you have one person, you can split it out, but it should total to one FTE, one full-time equivalent. Fairly self-explanatory. You have your fire stuff all lumped into here. If you have some folks that you count on for reviewing timber sale documents that are not paid out of forestry, but you might use the wildlife bio, for example, on an ID team, you could put down their portion of time, their 1/10 of an FTE or whatever it is into the appropriate category as well, or any of the cultural folks or anybody else. Any questions on the staffing one? The first ones are more complex, and as we get through here, it's a little more self-explanatory, so we'll be moving a little quicker on it. But any questions on staffing? All right, moving on for additional needs. This tab actually used to say just needs, but we added the word additional. So this is above and beyond your current staffing level. It's not broken out by tribal or allotted, but it's broken out by these these four categories. These four columns are similar to what we had on the staffing side. And then these are the dollars amounts associated with the folks, the FTEs that you put into here. One of the things you might do, and it's one of the things a number of tribes do, and we did at the regional office, is you may have dollars needed, for example, for a pre-sale forester. You don't need necessarily an additional person, but you have to go to the tribe, for example. Well, region doesn't go to the tribe, but the tribe may get gaming dollars to make that pre-sale for, $50,000 for that pre-sale person. Well, put in that you need $50,000 to make that position whole, because the tribe has to subsidize it all the time. What you need is $50,000, not from the tribe in gaming, for example, but you need it from the BIA. So make sure and get that need into here. Doesn't necessarily have to have a FTE over here. It could just have a dollar over here. This tab in particular is very nice to add your justifications, remarks and justifications, so that you can remember that, oh yeah, I put down 50,000 because gaming in place of the tribal gaming that we get, we need $50,000 over here. So putting your notes down in here is very helpful, actually, for staffing and additional needs. For both of these, it's very helpful to understand this winter what you did, and also in 5 years somebody can go back, either you if you're still in the position, or somebody else can go back and say, oh, that's why they put those dollars in there, rather than just seeing $50,000 in there, no explanation for it. And the sub-functions and sub-functions are all pretty much the same. The thing that's new on here is you're going to put a priority 1 through whatever. If you've got 10 different positions out in here, you put the priority in there for 1 through 10. And I think, 1 to 5. You're just putting a 1 to 5. So if you've got more than 5, the need for more than 5 positions, you can certainly put the priorities 6 through whatever, but at least rank the top 5. Oh, actually, the directions. I read the directions. It says don't do what I just said. Do not rank more than 5 functions. So rank the 5 functions of highest priority that is in critical need of additional support. Do not rank more than 5. We are recording this, so now everybody's got me down as having to correct myself. Any questions on the additional needs tab? All right, on to the training tab. This top chunk up in here is the training hours that were completed in 2019 for each of the different types of staff that you have. We didn't get it, but you don't need to put a priority on that. This can be left blank, the priority for the top part, the training hours completed. For training hours needed, and these are the major components that are on the previous tabs, you'll put down what the number of hours that are needed, and you can prioritize those however. 1 through 5. Not much to it. Any questions on the training tab? All right, going down the yellow brick road to retirements. This has 2 categories, one for the federal side, one for the tribal side. Obviously, if you only have one or the other, you're not going to fill the other in. This is the number that we're planning to estimate. Yes, I hear a question out there. Or not, okay. This is the number of retirements expected over the next 5 years. So within the next 5 years, if you have foresters, fire folks, computer, human resources, or other that are going to be retiring out, put them in the appropriate category, federal or tribal, and put them on down. Just put the number of people that are planned to be out within the next 5 years. And that takes us to the end of the tabs. And pretty much, I think, the one thing, actually, before I go on to that, any overall questions, anything go backs to any of the tabs out here, anything lingering questions that people have? Or are people just tired of listening to me? Maybe that's what it is. So the last thing I wanted to go over, so we went all the way through the agenda, staffing, additional needs, training, retirements. The last thing is to save and rename. There is the option, and it'll pop up occasionally that, hey, you haven't saved, you want to hit save, so you're going to hit the save button on this and save it out. But save early, save often. And then make sure at the end of this, you revisit your contact information to add in the number of hours it took you and or your team to complete this. So after you exit, you're going to rename this database from a Windows Explorer or something. So for example, and I'm not going to get rid of that, but I'm going to go like this. So you're going to go into the Windows Explorer type window, and I can't do it because I have it open right here, and I don't want to close it in case there's some questions. But you're just going to highlight it. And like in Northwest, for example, I was working on Lummi. I would just rename this to say Northwest-Lummi, and that's adequate. And so it'd be Northwest- whatever tribe is supplying this information. And then in whatever form, however you receive the database, you're going to then send it back to your regional point of contact so that they can take a look at it, verify some information, maybe probably give it the once over to make sure it looks good, or if they know your situation that, hey, did you forget so-and-so was retiring and you didn't even put them down, or whatever the case might be, the regional person that can take a quick look at that. And then us regional folks will be sending this information back to central office, BOFARC, for them to consolidate this down at the national level. All the different, so like for example, in the Northwest, we're going to have like 25 or 30 different databases that I will take a look at, review, and then I will get them all back to Stacy at BOFARP. She will use those plus all the other regions, and they're magically somehow going to put all this information together and create a great big glossy report with shiny letters on it and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure what's going to happen to the report. It'll be there for future reference for everybody. So that concludes what the remarks I had, unless people have questions, comments, concerns, or otherwise for me or the IFMAT staff or for Stacy.
So Kurt, this is Vinny again. So what's the timeline to get this data, and then when the IFMAT team may be able to view the 19 information?
I will defer to Stacy on that.
Yeah, this is Stacy. So all of this data is due into central office for fiscal year 2019 on October 31st. And then in November, we'll be working with our contractor, our contract developer at BOFARP to consolidate all the databases. And I'll have to talk to Don Patterson to give you an exact time frame for that for the IFMAT team.
Thank you, Stacy.
Hello,
Hello?
this is Gilbert Thompson from Mississippi Choctaw. What about indirect cost? Is that to be considered or put in somewhere?
I'm going to answer quickly and say no, and then I'm going to go read the directions to see if I'm lying to you. I think up here somewhere. Enter only direct funding, not indirect funding for values on this page. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Kurt, this is Colin Beck. I have a question for you.
You bet.
On the additional needs tab, if we're requesting additional, if we have something under the technical column, under what column would we enter the dollar amount needed for technicians?
So on this tab, it splits it out for the different type. You put it under technical, the FTE in there. The personal, if it's, so that, yeah, that's a good question. Let me explain that. So what personal services column is salaries and fringes.
Okay.
Service contracts is something you might contract out for. And then the other is everything else besides salaries and fringes, supplies, equipment, travel, training, all that, anything above and beyond salaries and fringe.
So if we needed to hire technicians that would be tribal employees, that dollar amount would be under personal services.
Yes, and if you needed to, and you figured you needed to rent or buy a vehicle, you would put in the vehicle costs and, whatever other costs associated. Their salaries and fringe would go in this column.
Okay.
Other associated with hiring them would go in the other column.
Okay. Thanks.
You bet. Anybody else? Anything else? All right. I've got one bonus item because I finally got it to pull up over here. There was a question earlier about the catalog of forest acres. This is from Infodat. This has got pulled forward. This is the catalog of forest acres. So it starts out over here what the reservation acres are, forested acres, and then the non-forest. And then it splits out this 29,000 of forested, whether it's reserved or unreserved. on the unreserved, whether accessible, inaccessible. It just kind of breaks it out as you go through here. This is the one Stacy was talking about, gets updated every year, and I'm not sure how the process is because Ken takes care of it for the Northwest, how this gets updated every year. Now, if you put information into the funding and position analysis report for your statistics and the acreage, we will need to reconcile with whatever acres you put in there to make sure it corresponds with what's on this page in here. But I don't know, Stacy, if you have any thoughts on how that's going to get reconciled, but this is the catalog of forest acres. This is how it pulled and put information into the FPA program.
Yeah, we'll definitely be taking a look at that, Kurt, after the year-end reporting. You know, the funding and position analysis is for fiscal year 19, and everybody's reporting on fiscal year 20 for the end of year updates for catalog of forest acres. So we'll have to look back at fiscal year 19, what was reported.
Mm-hmm. Right. And if you have access to this, you may be able to, you know, if you supplied information for 2019, you may be able to pull your information from here, if, you know, whether it's the reservation acres and the non-forest, to total them together, that particular, to fill in that particular cell. Again, this doesn't split it out by tribal or allotted or public domain, but anyway, this may be of some use to you if you have your old version of this from 2019 to help you with the reporting.
And just to add to that, Kurt, tribes will have to contact their BIA regional office to get that information out of InfoDat.
Right, not available to tribes directly. All right, anything else from the field, from out there in the world? All right, well, with that, I will say this is the end of it. If you have questions or concerns from the Northwest folks that are on, give me a call or send me an email. For those from other regions, hopefully, you know, talk to your regional forester, and if they're not the point of contact, they'll say, hey, so-and-so is the one to talk to on this. Again, the information's being collected by the end of the month. Ours is, you know, you're going to want to get it into the region as soon as you can so they can take a look at it, and make sure you spend some time on it, get good numbers in, should be good numbers out for the BIA, the analysis report, and for IFMAT, garbage in, garbage out, like they used to say in the day. So spend some time and try and get it as accurate as you can. If you have any questions, I guess one other thing I'll leave with is, as you go through this and you think, man, you know, this ought to change to this, or this isn't worded right or whatever, make a bullet list in a Word document and send them to your regional point of contact. We had, I think we had 20 some on the test version of this over the winter that came out of the Northwest, and that's why a number of things got updated, changed, or clarified, I guess, in the instructions. So if you see something that doesn't sound right, or maybe a different question, and this goes with the IFMAT folks as well, if there's something you're seeing on here, well, man, it sure would be nice if they would ask such and such a question. You know, as you go through it, you know, document that up and get it back to Stacy so she can figure out how to get that implemented for the next one. It won't, you know, there may not be trends data with that, but if we start, you know, the next collection process and keep that in there, then there can be trends of that kind of information going into the future.
Thanks, Kurt.
Any other closing remarks before we sign off?
Thanks for including us, John Gordon from IFMAT.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, everybody. This data is really important. This is Adrian from IFMAT as well.
All right. Well, with that, we will conclude. And Laura, I think as you were recording it, I'm not sure how you're going to get that posted, but we can figure out how to get that, whatever format that comes. If you can get it to Stacy and I, that'll be helpful. So I don't have to bore everybody again with this. They can just get bored by listening to it if they choose to.
Will do.
All right. Thanks all.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you, everyone.